Hello, my name is Julie, and last year, my major goal for my reading was to get my number of series down. So let's see how I did. I've seen lots of people do series audits before, and I'm always so fascinated by them, so I'm so glad that I'm finally doing one, especially because that was what my major work on my reading was last year. So for some background, if you're not familiar or have not been following my series journey, I have been doing reels that are tracking what my series are because I am terrible at DNFing series. What happens after I finish a book? If I dislike a first book in a series so much, I'll DNF it immediately. But a book that I feel mediocre about is probably going to stick around for a really long time. And so I have no problem continuing on the series that I really love. And I don't really have a problem immediately DNFing a series exactly after finishing it. But those books that I'm like, I'll wait and see how I feel. We'll see if the next book is good, that sort of thing. I am so bad at continuing on with those series that in 2024, I had 52 series I was in the middle of, and I was like, this has got to stop. I need to keep track of this. I need to get this problem out of here. And so I decided to make a spreadsheet. I think 2 videos ago, I showed you my reading tracker. This is the one that I have updated for 2026, so this is the 3rd version I have made of the spreadsheet. And having that spreadsheet totally motivated me to keep up with the series, get that number down. Between making a real series where I update you every single month on my numbers and using the spreadsheet and wanting to change the colors, get that number down as much as physically possible, I was very motivated and I did a great job. I went from 53 series I was in the middle of at the start of the year to 35 by the end of it. In that video, I run you through all of the stats of what my numbers were looking like as a bird's eye view, but in this video, I'm going to talk about the 40 books I read in 39 series, as well as briefly mentioning the series that I DNF'd without touching, just any series that I changed my status on this year, and what I thought of them. So maybe if you're also wanting to maybe pick up the series, maybe it'll give you some idea of whether you want to read them, but mostly just seeing my numbers go up and down. Editing me is going to hate me, but I am going to have a counter here of where I am. And I started out the year with 53 series I was reading, and 39 I was behind on. 53 of which I had not read from, of course, because it started the year. So I'm going to organize this by my interaction with the book. Starting a series, continuing a series, finishing, DNFing. Before we do that, I do have to admit that there are 6 books that I read that are technically in series that I did not consider to be for one reason or another. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Oryx and Crake, and Wicked were all books that I knew were in series before reading them, but I never ever had any intention of reading the sequels. Then there's The Teller of Small Fortunes, which I was under the impression was like the beginning of a companion series with this like 2nd book coming out from this author, but even Goodreads doesn't consider them to be companions, even though I'm under the impression that they're in the same world. So I don't know if they are or not, but that was one that I'm not considering on here because Goodreads doesn't. Then we have We Love You, Bunny by Mona Awad. I'm not counting this because Bunny was never on my spreadsheet to begin with. And then lastly, The Mysterious Affair at Styles. Yes, I read a Poirot. I don't consider this to be a strict series because there's 30 bajillion of them and you can read them in any order, and I've read them sporadically throughout the years. Yes, I could consider this to be a companion series if I wanted to drive myself insane, which I'm not. First category, the series that I started this year. The first 3 series that I started this year were all for my book club that I was running at the beginning of the year, and I no longer am. We switched themes every single quarter, and the first quarter theme that we did was African mythology-inspired fantasy. So the first one was Akata Witch by Nnedi Okorafor. This is a middle grade, like high middle grade, low AA series. Every time you look up like African mythology-inspired books, this always comes up, so that's why I picked it, even though it's not really a demographic I read anymore. There's a main character who's from America. She has albinism. She moves to Nigeria and finds there's like this secret world of people who have magic inspired by the culture. I believe Yoruba culture. I really struggled with the pacing of this book because like it felt like it was all world building and then tries to have a plot at the end, and it didn't really make a lot of sense. As much as I was really interested in the world and it felt like higher stakes than I would have anticipated for it, it didn't, like the plotting of it didn't make a whole lot of sense. Felt like there was an ending slapped on at the end, even if the ending was super predictable. And I just wasn't a fan of that. And I also don't really read middle grade anymore, so I decided to DNF this off the bat, so we're not not adding this to my counter. And I also have seen people who loved book 1 absolutely hate the sequel, so dodged a bullet. Next up, we have The Final Strife, which is the first in the Ending Fire trilogy. This is a completed trilogy, and this is African and Arabian inspired. There are different blood classes, and our main character is part of this rebellion force to try to take down the one that is in charge that has all the magic, but she has gone through so much trauma that she's not really sure if she's up for the job anymore. And I really enjoyed this book. It was a slow burn in terms of me getting invested, but I loved these characters and the relationship so much. On top of being interested in the world and wanting to take down this regime, I think it was just really well done. Unfortunately, I have heard that the second and third books are just not as good as the first one, but I'm still determined to read it anyway. This is a series I'm continuing on in, and I am behind on. I own the next book, and I'm actually planning on reading it this month. Then there's The Gilded Ones by Namina Forna. This is a YA trilogy, I believe, that is finished. There's like an area of this world where like girls, when they turn a certain age, might turn out to secretly be monsters, and our main character finds out that she's one of these people and gets conscripted into this army of similar people like her. This is one of the worst books I read last year, purely on craft. This is YA, and Akata Witch was supposed to be middle grade. I think that this is actually written at a lower reading level than Akata Witch. The author does not trust you to remember things that happened on the very same page, and it just felt like it was holding your hand so much. And it also like skips over important character development. It's just like, oh, and then there was a time skip and our character was an entirely different person after that. And I was like, this feels like someone's first draft in a novel, and I hate to dunk on this so much, but like there's so much to dunk on. Needless to say, I DNFed this, so not added to my counter. Then we have Dungeon Crawler Carl, which everyone and their mom is obsessed with right now. This is a lit RPG sci-fi fantasy where our main character Carl and his ex-girlfriend's cat Princess Donut are doing this dungeon underneath the surface of the earth run by aliens on a reality TV show to the death. It's if The Hitchhiker's Guide and Hunger Games had a video game baby. It's really enjoyable, and this is the only series that I have read more than one book in the year because I was trying to do like the spray and pray method. I was trying to interact with the highest number of series possible rather than reading more than one book in the series. And now because I did that work, I think I can do that in the future. But I really love book 1, and it was one of my favorite books of the year. So this is a series that I added to my total and I am behind on. I am borrowing the audiobooks of this series from a friend, and I'm also planning on reading the third book next month. Then we have The Justice of Kings by Richard Swan. This is the first in the Empire of the Wolf trilogy, which is completed. And this is about a woman who is reflecting on when she was a teenager being a scribe for an emperor's justice who goes around the countryside like doling out justice, but the man that she's following is actually much kinder than the law says he's supposed to be. They come across this woman who is murdered, but she didn't have any enemies, and they're figuring out why, and there's a lot of corruption. This feels like a very small scale first book that is going to blow up into a larger thing, and I just really loved how like isolated and cold and mysterious this first book felt, and I think it's really bodes well for a series I'm going to enjoy. So I did actually buy myself the second book in this series recently, and I'm hoping to shove it in sometime soon, but I don't know when it will be. Then we have Dream on Ramona Riley, which is the first book in the Clover Lake Romance Companions series. I have really enjoyed Ashley Herring Blake in the past. I have read all of her adult romance books, and as of the end of 2025, there was only this one book out, so I was caught up. As of filming this, the second book just came out yesterday, so I'm not caught up anymore, but it doesn't matter. We're talking about 2025. This is a small town romance series. There is a main character who dreams were dashed because she had to help out her dad, and she's been like a barista in this town. This movie is going to be filmed in their small town, and it turns out there's a girl that she met randomly one summer years ago, and it turns out that that woman is actually like a famous Nepo baby who's trying to start her like serious acting career. I bought the chemistry between these characters, but there was a lot that I found annoying, particularly any person who was not those two characters I found extremely annoying. I think I gave this like a 3.5, but I've tended to like this author in the past, so I am going to try out the second book, and if I don't like it, I'm just going to DNF the series and wait for her to publish something else. So it's being added to my counter, and I am caught up on it as of the end of 2025. Then we have The Mimicking of Known Successes by Malka Older. This is a sapphic sci-fi western mystery novella series. That's a mouthful. That is going to be at least 5 books long. There are only 3 books out at the moment, and I read the first one. I did not like this one much at all. I think the setting of this taking place on Jupiter was so cool and had such a fun atmosphere, but I don't think the author established enough of the world building for you to understand the mystery enough, and the relationship between these two was nearly non-existent. It says in the synopsis that they're exes, but like you could have fooled me. Nitpick about this book. I read Les Mis in 2025. as well as this book. Victor Hugo uses the word august a couple of times. I believe Malka Older used the word august the exact same amount of times that Victor Hugo did in 1,400 pages. Pick a different word. Oh my god. So yeah, I DNF'd this series as well, and I think I need to pump the brake on sci-fi fantasy mysteries because it's very rare that they work for me. Then we had To Shape a Dragon's Breath by Monoquill Blackgoose. This is the first in the Nampesha Wayasit series, which only the first book was out in 2025, so I was caught up at the time. This is an indigenous-inspired YA fantasy. I didn't know it was YA fantasy before I read it, and I'm so glad I didn't know because I wouldn't have picked it up otherwise. Our main character is an indigenous girl. There's not supposed to be dragons in her area, but she finds a dragon egg. The people who colonized her people come over and say, hey, you have to come to our dragon school or we'll take your dragon away from you. So she has to go to the school run by all these people who are super racist to her. And she is constantly fighting for herself and the other people around her who are also misfits. And I just really love how purely good of a main character she is, while this also has like a really charming magic system, while also dealing with very serious subject matter like racism and colonization. I think that this nailed exactly what it was supposed to do. Honestly, should this have been my best books of the year list? Possibly. I loved it, I'm continuing, and I'm caught up. Then we have The Raven Scholar by Antonia Hodgson. This is the first in the Eternal Path trilogy. Only this first book is out. We do not have a date for book 2. I've talked about this a lot, so I'll be brief. In a world in which they worship these animal gods that if they come back to Earth the next time, they will destroy the world, there is this competition for who's going to become emperor, and our main character, who is not part of the competition, is sort of sucked into solving the murder of one of the contestants. This has some of the best craft that I've seen in fantasy in a while. It has some of the best like establishing of world building. It will never info dump to you. And I really enjoyed the narrative style that it decided to take because it is very unique. This was a massive hit for a reason. I'm continuing and I'm caught up. Then we have second to last, The Stars Undying by Emery Robin. This is the first in the Empire Without End duology, which is a space opera duology that is inspired by Cleopatra, Antony, and Caesar. The first book is mostly following Caesar and Cleopatra. The second book is mostly Antony and Cleopatra. This is one of the least read and lowest rated books on my TBR, which is why I read it. It's very slow. There's very little plot. It's mostly people just in rooms talking to each other, like that one Pride and Prejudice review on Amazon. And like a lot of the interesting things that happen off screen. So I totally understand why nobody really liked this book, but I was so entranced by like the way that these characters would talk to each other. It felt like predators circling each other. And for some reason that worked for me, even though it was arduous to get through. So of all the series that I started last year that I have not already DNF'd, this is the one that I am most likely to DNF, but there's only one book left and I'm kind of curious what happens, so I might just finish it. Either way, in 2026, it will be dealt with. So I'm continuing, but I'm behind. Then the last series I started this year was The Devils by Joe Abercrombie. This takes place in an alternate version of our medieval period. There's a not very good at his job priest who is assigned to take this street urchin to Troy because it turns out that she's actually like the long lost heir to this religion's throne. And they are assigned these 6 magical / paranormal / strange criminals to take them all the way to Troy to do that. It is very irreverent. It is dark fantasy, but still fun. And it feels like playing a D&D campaign. I enjoyed it, but honestly, I felt satisfied enough by the end of the first book that there is a chance that like if it takes a really long time for us to get the next books, that I might just not pick it up. But I had a good time. So I'm continuing on with it for right now. We'll see how the other books in this series are rated. Now I'm going to talk about all the books that I continued, starting with all of the books that I am still behind on in the series. First, we have Shadows of Self by Brandon Sanderson. This is the second book in Mistborn Era 2, which is industrial inspired, a little bit Western. We have Wax and Wayne, who used to be like lawmen out in the Old West, but they were called into town and now are having to solve city folk crime. This is the only time a Mistborn book has been rated lower than the book previous to it, and I totally understand why. This felt like a filler book, and it also had a plot twist that we have seen Brandon Sanderson do before, so it felt really cheap to me and kind of like a nothing book when the first book felt like a fun prequel. I just don't think this did enough to establish itself as a singular entity. I was pretty disappointed by this one, but I have heard that books 3 and 4 are fantastic, so I am continuing and I am behind. I do own the next book. We also have The Last Devil to Die by Richard Osman. When I read this book, I was caught up in it, but the 5th book was published later in the year, so I'm now behind. This is the 4th book in the Thursday Murder Club series about a group of septuagenarians who solve crimes around their town. This book is the highest rated in the series because it is more focused on the emotional plot of like the arcs of these characters, and I totally understand why. I did enjoy this book. It wasn't my favorite of the mysteries, but I did think the bait and switch that it did was really effective because I was totally taken for that loop with them. Even though it wasn't like the most complicated of the mysteries, I did like the emotional heart of this book. I think I have like all these books kind of on par with each other. I really like them. They're a very good palate cleanser for me, and I want to read, maybe I should read more mystery series. I was caught up, but I'm not anymore, and I'm continuing. Then we have The Wicked King. This is the 2nd book in the Cruel Prince series, which is a YA fantasy series that I only picked up for clicks that I did not get. Why am I like this? It's inspired by like old-fashioned fairy lore, and our main character is a human who has been kidnapped and taken to fairy, has lived there most of her life, and is trying to get power for herself. I thought book 1 was okay, and then this is the highest rated book in the series, and I don't understand why, because it felt like nothing happened. I'm literally reading the book, and I had like halfway through the book, I had to read the synopsis to find out what the book said that the inciting incident was, because nothing happened in this book. I am not really invested in the relationship between these two characters. I just thought there was a lot of setup, and no payoff in this one, and I was just reading to read it rather than actually enjoying my time. So I decided to DNF this series, so I don't have to deal with it anymore. Then we have Blood of Elves by Andrzej Sapkowski. This is the 3rd book in the Witcher series, but it is the first book that is a full-length novel, while the other ones are short story collections. Of all of the series I was in the middle of, this is the one that the most people told me that I was not going to finish. I set up a poll like that on multiple occasions, and it happened both times. And they are absolutely right. I've decided to DNF this series. This book, even though it was a novel, it did still kind of feel choppy like a short story collection would. This is a whole lot of talking and nothing happening, like a bunch of the books that I complained about in this video. We don't get to spend very much time with Geralt. There seems to be actions going on off page that we are not privy to, and I really don't like the way that Andrzej Sapkowski writes women. So I have DNF this series. Then I read Fevered Star by Rebecca Roanhorse. This is the 2nd book in the Between Earth and Sky trilogy. This is inspired by pre-Columbian America, as we have all of these different like political and cultural factions are preparing for a total eclipse of the sun that is going to happen on the winter solstice. I enjoyed book 1 quite a lot, and then this 2nd book, like a lot of people have said, the sequels just kind of don't live up to the 1st book. It focuses on 2 characters that we didn't really talk about as much in the 1st book, and so I was less interested in them in this one, and the 2 characters we focused on in the 1st book are absolutely shafted in this book in terms of what their plot is. They just gonna sit on their hands and cry, and I'm like, I'm tired of this. I think the first 2 books in the series have really suffered from short page counts, and this is the 3rd book that I've read from Rebecca Roanhorse, and I have said that about every single one of her books, that she does not fill out the pages enough for me to really understand things and be interested. It feels like an editor just came in with a machete and took away half the book. There is a chance that I might DNF this series before I read the finale. However, the finale is much longer than the first 2 books, which could solve my problem, and it also has higher ratings, but that's because so many people DNF'd after book 2, so I don't really know what to do. Let me know what you think if you've read the finale. Then we have Carl's Doomsday Scenario. I've already brought up Dungeon Crawler Carl, so I did read the 2nd book. This is the only series that I repeated, and I didn't quite like this book as much as book 1, but it does make sense because this one is the one that takes place over like the smallest amount of time. I do really like how he is building the world of the video game and how it works. It's going great. Then we have The Faithless by C.L. Clarke. This is the 2nd book in the Magic of the Lost series, which is very not subtly inspired by France's colonization of Northern Africa. Our main character is from fictional Africa, taken to France as a child and trained as a soldier, and when they are trying to quell some rebellions down in fictional Africa, she gets sent there and she connects with people who are like her, realizing that she wants to fight this colonization. There's also a romance between the person who is like the princess of France, who is in charge of this area, and her, and it's a really fun dynamic of like, are they even a good match for each other, considering what they are to each other? I spent a long time between book 1 and book 2, and I remembered basically everything that happened in book 1 pretty well. Even though there was less action happening, it felt like a good addition and matched up to what I remembered of book 1. So I was caught up on this series for about a week, and then the third book finally came out, so I will hopefully be finishing this in 2026. Then we have The Sapphire Altar by David Dalglish. This is the second in the Vagrant Gods series. It's in this world where there used to be these giant gods that would roam the earth that feel like legendary Pokemon to me. And the magic system in this world is that the more you believe in something or have faith in something, worship something, the more magic it'll get. And there's this guy called the Immortal Emperor or something like that. And he's been killing off all these other gods to try to be the one and only god on the planet. There is an island that has been taken over by this empire who is trying to fight back. This is a very, very underrated series that I've heard literally nobody else talking about. I do think it's totally worth a read. I thought that this second book had some pacing problems, but ultimately it had a lot of really good themes. I liked the character journeys. I liked how many people are apologizing for their actions and everything and trying to be better people. And also I thought that the plot twists at the end were absolutely crazy. I am continuing and I'm behind on this series. We have apparently Abaddon's Gate. I thought it was Abaddon's Gate, but the audiobook said Abaddon's Gate. Anyway, this is the third book in the Expanse series, which is like 7 books long or something, 9 books long. I don't know, it's long, but it is a completed series. I really enjoyed books 1 and 2, and then book 3 really felt like a Monster of the Week episode. It didn't feel like it had stakes like the other ones. It didn't feel like it was building on the world that we had established previously. It just felt like, we need another plot. What are we going to do? And I just ultimately did not care and just wanted to keep skipping through the audiobook. So I'm still continuing, and the more I've talked about The Expanse, the more people have told me that there's a total dip in quality, and that makes me really nervous that I'm not going to finish this series, but I loved the first couple of books so much that I'm definitely going to try to continue. I'm continuing, and I'm behind. Then we have When the Tiger Came Down the Mountain by Nevo. This is the second book in the Singing Hills cycle, but it is the third that I've read. This is a fantasy novella companion series that you can kind of read in any order. All of the books are about this cleric called Chi who goes around to different parts of the country trying to get different folk tales. I have read books 1 and 4, and now I have read book 2. This specific one, Chi is hearing a tiger and a human tell 2 sides of the same story. They're good folk stories. I just don't care that much. Like if someone just in real life told me a folk story, I'd be like, that's a good folk story. I wouldn't think of a rating for it. It doesn't feel right for me to rate these books, and I haven't liked either of the 2 that I read as much as I liked book 1. People have said that those are the most loved books, so maybe it would be good for me to DNF, but I do think they're a nice palate cleanser for me to shove in between other things. So I think I'm gonna give them one more go and see if I want to keep reading this. A very similar situation, I read Exit Strategy by Martha Wells. This is the 4th book in the Murderbot novella series of sci-fi books about this robot who previously murdered a ton of people but doesn't really know what happened with that and is trying to investigate that. All they want to do is watch their dramas, but they have to be a security robot. I really only have liked book 2 in this series, so reading book 4 was like the straw that broke the camel's back. I really didn't care, and every single one of these books follows the exact same plot formula. I just kept rewinding this audiobook thinking that I had missed something and I hadn't. It's just so short. I don't find Murderbot to be a very compelling character. It feels like the exact same saving people plot happens in all of these books. So I'm done with this. I don't need to be reading this series anymore. I was continuing on in the series because they're short, they're easy for me to get my hands on from the library. I don't need to be doing that anymore. I can just read things that I like. So I am DNFing this series. Then we have A Closed and Common Orbit by Becky Chambers. This is the second in the Wayfarer series. It's a companion series about different people in this sci-fi world. It's fairly cozy, but it does have serious things going on. And in this one, there is an AI from a ship that is being put into a human-looking body for the first time and having to blend in, but really struggling with wanting to be themselves, but not wanting to be caught because that's illegal. I really enjoyed this book, not quite as much as I remember loving A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet 7 years ago, but I did think that it had the right amount of cozy and serious and people building a good community and everything and learning from each other, becoming better people because of each other. This is a finished series, so I am 2 books behind and I am continuing. Then we have Mixed Signals by BK Borison. This is the third in the Love Light Farm series, which I love the first book, hated the second book. So this was a huge litmus test, and this book is about Layla, who is a baker baker, Caleb, who has been in love with her forever, but she's never noticed him. She's been going on some bad dates. He like swoops in and saves her from a bad date, and she suddenly notices him, and he's like, hey, I'll take you out and I'll show you how you should be treated, and you can tell me why I keep getting broken up with. And of course, it's just a ploy to get her to go out with him. I did like this one. These books are a little bit more focused on the romance rather than their personal lives individually than I usually prefer my romance books to be, but I think she sells the chemistry pretty well, and I do feel things for these characters, and I love how important communication is to them. This is a series I'm behind on, and I am continuing, and I am only one away, so I should be able to finish this in 2026. And then the last one in this category is Bloodmarked by Tracy Dion. This is the second book in the Legendborn series, which I have been informed is not a trilogy. It is at least a quartet, which makes me a little bit more nervous because this is a YA fantasy series where our main character Bree finds herself at early college, and it turns out that like she's surrounded by the descendants of Arthur and the Round Table, and it turns out she also has her own magic that is different from theirs. And I love the fantasy elements of this book, and I love all of like the themes and everything. But when it comes to the YA romance plot of this book, I really cannot stand this love triangle and these boys, and anytime the best friend character is like teasing her about the boys, anything to do with that, I just cannot stand it. It is something that I did not like even when I was a teenager. This is the lowest rated book in the series, if I'm not wrong. I thought it was okay. I thought in this book that Bree was treated pretty poorly by the narrative itself in just a really predictable YA way that is boring to read. A way that nobody takes her seriously, but like also she doesn't know what she's doing, and it's just a really boring arc to read. I've heard pretty good things about Oathbound. There's some stuff in this book that's like 5 stars for me, and there's some stuff in this book that's like 2 stars for me, so I don't know what I want to do. Now we have all of the series that I continued on in that I am now caught up on. This was a category that I was really trying to get on top of this year. First, we have Note of the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. This is the third book in the Locked Tomb series. This is a very confusing sci-fi fantasy horror series that is about lesbian necromancers in space. This third book really takes a pivot from the previous 2 books, and each of these books feels like really unique from each other. And I read this book in print after not enjoying the audiobook experience of the second one and being super confused, and I think reading it physically and like with guides and everything was totally the way to go, and I was able to totally understand what was going on. I almost DNFed this series, and I'm so glad I didn't because I really did enjoy book 3 a lot. So I'm continuing and I'm caught up. Then we have A Drop of Corruption by Robert Jackson Bennett. This is the second book in the Shadow of the Leviathan series. I didn't really like book 1. This is a fantasy, almost sci-fi feeling mystery series where we have a Sherlockian pair, and they both have these heightened senses because of these biological grafts that have been put on them through this like plant and like algae magic that the world has. I thought the mystery of book 2 was simply superior to book 1, and I actually had a good time versus in book 1, like the longer the book went on, I wasn't enjoying it. I just thought that this was like an actually solvable mystery, had a really interesting political plot, and there was a fun plot twist at the end of the book. So I am going to be continuing on the series. We have gotten confirmation that book 3 is going to be coming out in 2026. I don't think we know how long the series is going to be though, so we'll see if I can finish it or just be caught up. Then we have The Enchanted Greenhouse by Sarah Beth Thirst. This is the second in the Spellshop companion series. I believe this is supposed to be a 4-book series, and we have got an announcement for book 3 coming out in summer 2026. In this specific installment, there is a woman who had previously been turned into a statue because she used magic illegally, and now she's waken up unstatuified on this island she'd never been to that is in winter with this magical greenhouse that sprawls for rooms and rooms and rooms and rooms. And she meets this man who is the last person taking care of this greenhouse as it is slowly dying, and she's going to have to do magic to save it, even though it's technically illegal. I didn't like this book as much as I liked book 1, but I do think that Sarah Beth Thirst does a really good job making cozy fantasies that I want to read that have just enough stake to them, that have just enough of like personal versus large plot. I really like the fun talking plant thing that she has going on, and it's just a world that I think is doing something a little bit unique compared to other fantasy that I've been reading. So I am caught up and I'm continuing. Then we have What Stalks the Deep, which is the third in the Sworn Soldier series, which I'm under the impression is only 4 books. I don't know, and I don't think we have a confirmation on a date for 2026. But this is about Alex Easton, who is a soldier from a fictional country where if you become a soldier, that is like the gender identity you choose. Anyway, each of these books is like a short horror that is inspired by a different short story or folklore thing. And this third book is set in Appalachia and inspired by a H.G. Wells, I believe it's called The Mountains of Madness. I haven't read it. I thought that this book was good, but lacked the bite that the previous books did. I did not believe like the monster horror part of this book, even though I did feel kind of the claustrophobia of the cave systems that we were in. I think there was a fun, cute little guy to hang out with, but like otherwise, I just didn't like feel nearly as much as I did for specifically the first book, What Moves the Dead, which I think is one of the creepiest books I've read in a long time. I'm continuing, and I'm caught up. Then we have The Strength of the Few by James Islington. This is the second book in the Hierarchy series, the first book of which was my favorite book of 2024 and one of my favorite books of all time. This second book I don't think necessarily lived up to book one because it was trying to do something so much larger than its page count allowed it to do, and I wish that James Islington was allowed to write a book that was twice as long to be able to get the same intense detail that we got in book one and carry that into book two. And I think a comment that I've seen a lot is that book two is very confusing. Like specifically, people have been commenting to me to explain book two to them, but I am caught up in the series and I'm continuing. And the last one of this category is The Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping by Sangu Mandana. This is in the Irregular Witches Companion series, but honestly, these books are so disparate that like I don't think that they should be considered to be companions, and I'm considering taking them off of my list for that reason. We have no news of if there are going to be more books in this series at all. It took a very long time for book two to be published. I'm going to hold on to this series until we see what happens with another book. I loved book one. It's my second favorite cozy fantasy of all time. This book specifically is about Sarah, who used to be a very powerful witch when she was a teenager, but when she used her powers to revive her aunt who suddenly passed away, her magic kind of went away, and now she's in her 30s. She's been trying to get her magic back, and this guy from her past comes back, and they're trying to return her magic to her. And I like get what the themes of this book were going for, and I understand the like burnout and someone like feeling like that they can't return to something from their past and feeling like a failure because of that. However, I just like didn't really buy the plot here. The only thing I really got was the found family aspect. I do think was done well, but I did not buy the chemistry between the two main characters, and I didn't really care about the returning her magic plot as much as I would have liked to. We'll wait to see if we get another book, and if we do, I'll wait to see reviews for that. Then we have the series that I finished this year. First up, we have Win in Truth by Brandon Sanderson. Wait, I hear you tell me, the series isn't over yet. I said it's over. Arc 1 is over, and we're waiting 5 years at least for book 6. Yeah, this is considered the end of Arc 1 to me, brother. Win in Truth is the 5th book in the Stormlight Archives, one of my favorite series of all time. It's about an ancient order of knights that are coming back to face an ancient evil, and there's magical power armor and power swords. This book was my least favorite in the series thus far. I think it was very ambitious and honestly could have been even longer. I did think that the ending of the book specifically felt like it went out not with a bang, but with a whimper, and in that way I felt dissatisfied, but there were a lot of things about the characters that I did enjoy seeing on screen, and these are some of my favorite characters of all time, so I did finish out the series. Then we have The Teeth of Dawn by Marina Lostetter. This is the last in the Helm of Midnight series. What is this called? The 5 Penalties is what the series is called. I love The Helm of Midnight. It was one of my favorite books of the year I read it, which is like a fantasy horror as somebody has stolen a mask imbued with the soul of a notorious serial killer and is now repeating his murders. And that's just like a very, very fun plot that I feel like the plot of that book could have been its own standalone, and the idea of the world itself could have been entirely a separate idea, and I kind of wish you would have done that, because I just don't think book 2 or book 3 were nearly as successful, and the things that book 3 specifically was successful about, all of those things were nothing that had to do with the previous books. Like, it absolutely shafts the main characters that they don't have anything to do with this book, and we're focusing on something that feels entirely different, and even though it has some very creative things going on, it just doesn't feel connected to the previous books. So I would recommend you read The Helm of Midnight and treat it as a standalone, even though I thought the books coming after it were all right. So finish the series. Then we have As Good as Dead by Holly Jackson. This is the last in the A Good Girl's Guide to Murder series, which I absolutely adored. Good Girl's Guide to Murder was one of my favorite books of 2024. And this is following Pip, who is a high schooler, and she is solving murders that happen in her town. And in this last book, she believes that she has a stalker and she is trying to deal with that. The first 2 books are definitely mysteries, and this third book is more of a thriller. I don't think I quite liked that as much because I think it did stretch my credulity a little bit more than the previous books did, but it was an intense ride, and I still would encourage people who enjoyed book 1 to continue out the series. So I finished that one, yay! While filming this, I completely forgot that I also finished Ruthless Vows by Rebecca Ross. This is a YA fantasy romance duology in an era inspired by the World Wars, except it is not two countries that are fighting, it is two different gods, basically picking out random people to fight for them. Our main characters are rival reporters doing the same beat, and they end up going to cover the war. And there's a You've Got Mail element of them contacting each other, but she doesn't know that he is the one that she's contacting. I really, really loved Divine Rivals, but I am falling into the popular opinion here of the second book not being quite as good. I actually predicted this was going to happen with it, that as soon as it decided to focus more on the fantasy that they hadn't built out very well, that it was going to fall a little bit short. I do think it did, even though I do very much root for this romantic relationship. I also thought there were way too many people paired up for kind of no reason, but that's just me. So I did finish this one. Then we have Holy Sister by Mark Lawrence. This is the last in the Book of the Ancestor trilogy, which I started the first book for my book club ages and ages ago. This is about a school for assassin nuns on a frozen planet where all of the population is kind of coming in on one part of the planet that isn't frozen anymore. I really enjoyed the first book. I just don't think the second or third books really lived up to what happened in the first book at all. This book is the shortest of the whole series, and it takes place in 2 timelines. So I felt really unmoored in the book, and it felt like it had way less to give me. It didn't feel like a satisfying conclusion of these characters or this fighting. I just don't understand why any last book would ever be the shortest book. That just tells you how little the author had to say. This was disappointing to me. If you want to read Red Sister, I won't stop you, but I would say that the sequels didn't live up to its potential. We have The Bloodless Princes by Charlotte Bond. This is a novella duology that starts with the Fireborn Blade. About our main character is Madeline, who is a lady knight, and she has been exiled from her knight guild and is trying to kill a very legendary dragon in order to get respect again. These novellas are strange. They aren't very focused on the plot of the characters. There's a lot of world building chapters that are happening in this novella where we already don't get to see all of these characters. Even though it's following the same characters, it didn't make any sense to me that this is duology because these books don't seem to do a whole lot with each other. I don't think the plot of book 2 connects to the plot of book 1 very much, so why are there only 2 of them? Unless you are a huge fan of fantasy novellas, this isn't something that I would recommend widely. I think there was a really cool plot twist at the end of book 1, and that was kind of the only thing I had to write home about the series. Then we have The Winners by Fredrik Backman. This is the last in the Beartown trilogy, which is the only general fiction series I think I have on this list, because I've been totally holding off on some of mine. This is about a small town in Sweden that is very dependent on its junior hockey club, and in the first book, when something terrible happens that involves the hockey club, there is a lot of divisiveness about how to go about approaching that. And I do think the first book is the best book in the series, but the 2 books do hold up. I do think if you enjoyed book 1, and you don't want to continue, you don't have to, but if you are excited about the sequels, I don't think you'll be disappointed. I think book 2 is the weakest and book 3 was better than that. I think it was interesting to see these characters aged up a little bit more. I think it was interesting to see the neighboring town and how they perceive everything that's going on here, and I just love how Fredrik Backman is constantly attacking the patriarchy in this series to no end. It is every single chapter. Very, very good, and I finished that series. Then we have A Curse Carved in Bone by Danielle Jensen. This is the second and final in the Saga of the Unfaded series. I want you to know that I have not Googled the name of any of these series. I'm doing them off the dome, and I'm really impressed with myself. Anyway, this is the second book in this fantasy romance duology. I've really pumped the brakes on picking up fantasy romance because it just doesn't work for me anymore. And Danielle Jensen is an author that I've really trusted before. Fate Inked in Blood was my least favorite of her books that I had read at that point, and A Curse Carved in Bone I think was only worse. It takes what it could have been an interesting villain and turns turns them into like a mustache twirling Disney villain that has no redeeming factors or whatever. And like everybody else who isn't this person is redeemed, even though they were considered like complicated people before that. I didn't buy the romance at all. Man's name is Bjorn. I could not take Bjorn seriously at all. I think the magic in this series was fun. Like it kind of felt like a little bit like Marvel magic to me, like Doctor Strange-ish, which I thought was fun, but like other than that, I really just didn't get sold on this series. And the last series that I finished this year was Ocean's Echo by Everina Maxwell, which it's not confirmed. This is another one of those like companion series where like the connection between them is so tenuous that why did you even consider them to be companions in the first place? I thought that the first book, Winter's Orbit, was just kind of a sci-fi romance with a fairly typical plot that I've kind of seen before, but this book really was its own thing. I think this is just genuinely a better book than book one is. It feels more mature, not R-rated subject, but just like being about a more complicated subject matter, handling it really well, and actually leaning into the speculative element of the book. Rather than the first book, it could have been set on Earth. It really could have. This specific book is about, there was a military experiment that genetically changed a small group of people to be readers who can mind read other people, and a small group of people to be writers who can mind control people. Years later, the military is now hunting down all of these reader people, and there's a guy who's a socialite who his family is tired of him, and they like conscript him into the army to get mind melded with a writer so that basically he no longer has any autonomy. And the guy who he gets assigned to finds out that he didn't sign up for this of his own free will and is like, hey, we're not doing that. We are going to get you out of here. We're going to pretend that we've mind melded and get you somewhere safe. And I really enjoyed all of the themes that came with that, and I thought it just had some really creative description. Even if you did not like Winter's Orbit, I think that this book is totally worth a read and feels totally different. If you liked Winter's Orbit, I don't think there was anything stopping you from liking this, but don't expect it to be the same like melodramatic romance. Then we have the series that I DNF'd this year that I did not read from. So the first 4 that I have here, I actually DNF'd before I made my video that was 22 series I might DNF. So those were Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. I read the first book at the end of December 2024. I just decided to DNF it like a month after reading it because I realized I only gave it like a 3.5. There were a lot of problems that I had with it, particularly the ending of book 1, and I just didn't have enough pulling me to continue on the series, so I DNF'd it. I also had The Wheel of Time, which I don't even know what book I got to, like 7? I hated my time from like books 4 to 7. I think that these characters are unbearable. Even though I have read over 7,000 pages about these characters, they have not changed as people. They read the exact same. Robert Jordan believes that men are from Mars and women are from Venus, and never the two shall meet. And I just really hate the like rampant sexism of this series. People who are like, oh, but the series is so good, but the fantasy part. I'm like, I can't pay attention to the fantasy part when everybody's a dickhead. Then there's the Last Magician series, which is like a YA time travel fantasy heist series. I read the first book a really, really long time ago with the book club. I thought it was okay. I can barely remember anything about this book, and I just needed to finally say I wasn't going to continue on in the series because I think I gave it like a 3.5. Then we have the Alex Stern series. It starts with Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. I'm not a Leigh Bardugo girly. I think I liked Ninth House when I read it, and then the longer I thought about it, the more I just didn't give a shit. Whatever the second book is like one of my favorite book covers ever. I like even this beautiful book cover cannot convince me to read this book because I just like don't care. I think her YA books, the characters pop so much more off the page than her adult books do, and I kind of don't know why she's thrown that out. So DNF that pretty early on in the year. Then in my Do It or DNF video, which I am planning on returning to in 2026, I DNF'd 2 series that I had on my TBR for the longest. Those were Magnus Chase by Rick Riordan. I was a huge Percy Jackson fan and read the first book in Magnus Chase when it came out. I wasn't in love with it, and I had kind of outgrown the series by that time, and I thought the series had kind of jumped the shark at that point, so I didn't want to DNF it because Rick Riordan is so formative to my reading experience that I didn't want to do anything about it, but I needed to, so I got it out of here. As well as the Founders series by Robert Jackson Bennett. The first book I ever read from him was Foundry Side, and I gave it 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. I read the second book a long time ago. It took a long time for book 2 to be released, and I felt like I had forgotten a lot about book 1, and I just didn't feel anything for book 2, which has a lower average rating than book 1 does, and book 3 has a lower average rating than book 2 does. does. So I had no plans on continuing on, so I just decided to DNF. Then there's the Remembrance of Earth's Past series, which starts with the 3-body problem. I read this a really, really long time ago, and while I was intellectually stimulated, I was not emotionally connected to the book, which honestly, it's not what the book is going for, but if you're gonna make me read a series, I have to have some sort of emotional link to the book. You know, I'd be much more interested in watching the TV show than rereading book 1 and continuing on the series. So I DNF'd. There is an author that I found problematic that I am not reading her books anymore, so I DNF'd both of her series, even though like I had decided I wasn't gonna read those series a long time ago, but they just still were on my list. So that was 2 series that I am no longer reading. And then in my video in which I had a bracket choose what I DNF'd, I had the series that I most wanted to DNF. I decided to DNF all 4 of them. One of them was The Witcher, which I already mentioned, and the second of those was the Sanderson trilogy by Chelsea Abdullah. The first book is The Stardust Thief, and I read that with my book club, and I thought it was okay. It was really action-packed and kind of sacrifices character in order to have a lot of action, and I think the book club felt the same way. It took a really long time for book 2 to come out. People who I know who gave Stardust Thief like a 5-star favorite fantasy of all time really did not like book 2, so I was like, I barely remember the first book to begin with. I barely liked it to begin with, so why would I continue on? So I DNF'd. The third of which was the Kingdom trilogy by Bethany Jacobs, I believe. This is a sci-fi series that has to do with, there's this like order of assassins that like one of its people has departed and is now trying to attack them, and so it's like a cat and mouse chase, while there's also this like genocide going on in the background that some people are trying to stop from making worse. This is a book that I like kind of struggled to follow, and I was reading it in a video and I kind of played up how much I was liking it to myself. It wasn't something that I was like actively trying to do. It was something that I realized later that I actually didn't like it that much, and I wasn't really following a lot of the sci-fi stuff. I think I was just trying to rush myself through the first book, so I don't really remember much of what happened in book 1, even though there were some plot twists that I know for a fact blew me away. If you're looking for a space opera series, this is something that I might point you to, even if I'm not going to continue on in the series. And we have the Dark Shores series by Danielle L. Jensen. This is a YA series that she just finished in 2025, so there was a long time in between the books. My library only had the audiobook of the first book, which is why I did not continue on in the series, and it had been so long since I read book 1 that I just wasn't really interested in continuing on with it. This is like, there's a seafaring people and like a Roman people, and the Roman people find a ship of people, force them to come with them to this other island that they're gonna like colonize. And honestly, I know that this is only the first book in the series, but it was really worrying me. Obviously the Romans are the bad people, but I don't think that this book was anti-colonialist enough for me. There's 3 books of stuff for her to keep going and improve on that message or whatever. I didn't feel like going out of my way to like remember what happened in the first book and continue on. I'm okay. If someone wants to let me know if that message ends up improving on in the series just for my peace of mind, I'd be curious to know. It's been so long since I read the first book that there's no reason for me to go back. There's so many other things I'd rather read. And then after I did that video, I realized that I did not DNF the series that I actually had rated lowest, and that was The Legends of the First Empire by Michael J. Sullivan. I'm not eliminating reading the other series by Michael J. Sullivan, but this is a prequel series to that series. So this is taking more in like a Bronze Age setting because elves are really long living. They believe that elves are gods. I was told that this series was super epic, and then I read the book and it felt like nothing happened for the whole book, and I wasn't attached to any of the characters. I did listen to this in audiobook, but it wasn't the graphic audio, and I found out my library had the graphic audio, which is why I didn't DNF it. And then I realized, why do I care about a graphic audio when I literally could not tell you what happened in the first book? And the last one that I technically DNF'd is Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson, because so we've known for a very long time that Nightblood is going to be a sequel to Warbreaker, but it is no longer on Brandon Sanderson's like calendar of books he's going to release. Warbreaker is being re-released in 2026, and all of the marketing around it is that it is a standalone. So I'm not DNFing this. When Nightblood comes out, I'll read it, but it is being marketed as a standalone, so why do I have it on my spreadsheet? Get it out of here. And in case you're curious, all of the series that I did not interact with in 2025 that I still have on my list are right here. Some of them I was caught up on, and some of them I was behind on and just didn't get a chance to read. Some of them I'm considering DNFing, especially because of authors. Those are all those series. So my final count for 2025 was that I am in the middle of 35 series, 23 of which I am behind on, and 11 of which I did not read from this year. So I was so proud of my progress. Obviously, I did a lot of work. You can tell how many books that I had to talk about. There was a lot. I think the major things that I found were starting fewer series and DNFing way more were the way for me to make that amount of progress. But with the amount of bushwhacking that I did, that is not a rate that I'm going to be able to sustain. I know for a fact that there are fewer series that I am available to finish, and there are fewer series that I'm planning on DNFing. So what I really need to do this year is start fewer series, be as dedicated to continuing and finishing series as I can, so that when I do start series in the future, I can read them much closer together. So thank you so much for coming with me. Please let me know, how are you doing with series? Are you in the middle of too many? Are you like me, a person who waits a really long time in between sequels? Or are you a normal person who binges series? Do you have a series problem? Or are you just like maniacally laughing at me for being like this? If there's any series that I'm still considering myself to be in the middle of that you absolutely want me to continue on in, or absolutely want me to DNF, please let me know down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to find me anywhere, you can find me at the links in the description. And if you'd like to watch more of my videos, you can hit subscribe. I would love to have you around. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.